Hello, we are back, and from today we are going to look beyond propositional logic. We have finished talking about propositional logic, and today I'll tell you why we need to go outside of propositional logic and what is the route, where we are going to go. So our module 31 of symbolic logic, today we are going to look into, first of all, what are the limitations of propositional logic. And then through that we are going to start looking into the logic of classes. Propositional logic was logic of propositions, and today onwards we are going to look into logic of classes, and in that connection we are going to learn about a new set of propositions, categorical propositions, and the crucial concepts of quantity and quality of categorical propositions. So that is going to be on our hand for this module 31. See, I am going to just ask you to consider this, that take a look into this argument, knowing what you know about arguments. Roads are congested. If roads are congested, we shall be late, therefore we shall be late. Now, if I ask you, is it valid or invalid? And you are going to say that this is with what you know, that this is valid, and not only I know this to be valid, but I can demonstrate its validity too using the propositional calculus, what we have learned. So first, what will you do? You are going to translate it like so: roads are congested. If roads are congested, we shall be late, therefore we shall be late. So there you go. It's a classic application of modus ponens by which you can show its validity also, right? But now consider this other argument. City roads are congested. All congested roads bother citizens, therefore city roads bother citizens. All right. Now, if I ask you, is this valid? What do you think? If the premises are true, can the conclusion be false? The answer is no. So in a way, you understand that it is valid, right, when you are reading this. But with your symbolization tools that you have learned in propositional logic, when you are going to symbolize this, take a good look at this argument. The symbolization takes the whole structurally simple sentence and assigns it a capital letter, right? That is what we have learned. So here is one sentence which you may pick C to represent. Then there is all congested roads bother citizens. Now that is again a structurally simple proposition. So we need to, and it's a different one. So we need to assign it a different capital letter. So like so, B. Therefore city roads bother citizens, which is a third proposition, structurally simple, which we are going to again assign the capital letter, say R. Now take a look at this argument when it's symbolized. CB therefore R, is it valid? No. And then not only that, you can probably demonstrate that it can be invalid using the shorter truth table anytime. You will just assign true, true, and R you just assign false arbitrarily, and that's about it. So what happened? What happened is that you can recognize that it is valid. When you are reading this sentence, you are processing in your brain somehow the connection, but with propositional logic, the kind of symbolization mechanism that you have, it simply is not becoming evident. The validity is no longer evident in the symbolized form. Somewhere we have lost it, as we call it, lost in translation. So where have we gone wrong, and what is the problem here? I am obviously trying to make a point here. So what is that point? What you sense when you read that argument, roads are congested, all roads, city roads are congested, all congested things bother citizens, therefore citizens are bothered, city roads bother the citizens. Then if you are reading in that way, what you are recognizing is that there is a logical relationship given. somehow these are connected. And if I ask you with a figure to represent that, probably you will give me something like this, saying that look, there are this broader set or class of things that bother the citizens. The congested roads are a class within that larger class. So, all congested roads are such that there are things that bother the citizens, and city roads being congested are a part of this, right. So, what we have is a sort of a circles within the circle, a class within the class of. Somehow you have captured this logical relationship, your acquaintance with the words, but your symbolization did not capture this logical relationship at all. So, that is where we have somehow missed out important logical information. Let us consider another example before we make the point clearer. Take a look. It is not the case that rabbits are elephants. Okay? 2. Second premise, Bugs Bunny is a rabbit. Therefore, Bugs Bunny is not an elephant. Valid or invalid? Valid. Of course, if this is true, this is true, this has to be true. But then again, the problem is that when symbolized, somehow this whole validity notion is lost, because symbolization it will come out as not or, for example, because all you have is it is not the case that rabbits are elephant. That rabbits are elephant is a structurally simple proposition which you are going to represent like so, with it is not the case attached to it. Bugs Bunny is a rabbit, that is B. Therefore, Bugs Bunny is not an elephant, somehow it is becoming a third one. Therefore, neither R nor B, somehow it is, we are bound to assign a different capital letter to it. So, this is the problem. We could not capture the validity of these arguments using what we know from propositional logic. Why is that? Why are we missing out so much? And where is the problem with propositional logic in this case? And this answer is going to actually be rather interesting. Do you remember what we said about propositional logic? What is its ultimate unit? What unit does propositional logic operate upon? And the answer was simple propositions. Simple in what sense? Structurally simple. So, our basic elements in propositions logic was structurally simple propositions, right. We could not analyze them any further. In fact, we added to them connectives to make more and more complex or compound structures, correct. Now, that is where I think we need to concentrate now, that this limit set on propositional logic is the root of this problem, why we could not capture the validity of these arguments. Why? Because often logically significant information is given at what we call the subsentential level, beneath the structurally simple proposition level. So, there is a sub level that where within the simple proposition sometimes important logical information can be obtained. And when that happens, what happens is that propositional logic cannot access that important information. Why? Because it stops only at the simple proposition level. It cannot go any further deeper, whereas the information lies in the deeper level, right. So, this is, as we saw, that what we were dealing with in each of these arguments cases were structurally simple propositions, say for example, in this one. So, all structurally simple propositions, and somewhere there is a logical relationship that works out not apparently at the propositional level, but somewhere deep within the proposition. So, unless we can reach out inside the proposition itself, there is no way we can access that information. So, this is where we need to sort of check ourselves, and this is where the problem shows up as the limitations of propositional logic. So, ultimate unit of its logical operation is the structurally simple statements or propositions, and therefore, it stops at the structurally simple propositions. It cannot further analyze those statements to recover whatever important logical information might be given in them, inside them. So, somehow we need to now question that, somehow we are going to push the boundaries of propositional logic or leave propositional logic and find out other advanced level of analysis that will allow us not to stop at this arbitrary stopping point of structurally simple propositions. So, that is our next step, that we need to go beyond propositional logic, which will allow us further logical analysis of structurally simple propositions. And if we do that, if we embark upon such a journey, then there are two possible stops in front of us. One is what we would call the Aristotelian logic of subject predicate classes, and this is what we are going to call the logic of classes. And then there is first order predicate logic too, okay, which is going to be our next stop. So, first we are going to learn into this Aristotelian logic. So, remember, the limitations of propositional logic sort of pushes us to go beyond propositional logic and look into this kind of directions. Okay? This is what we are doing. When we are starting out Aristotelian logic of classes, these are the key terms that you might just remember to get acquainted with, and these are, each one of these we are going to touch upon and explain in the lectures to come, but it is important that you sort of put a checklist on whether you have understood each of this as we go along talking about this. So, we will start with categories. See, Aristotle's logic of classes has been handled by many logicians after Aristotle also. And as I have tried to tell you during my history lesson, history of logic lesson, that Aristotle became very popular in the medieval period. So, there were a lot of medieval logicians who have worked with Aristotle's logic. But Aristotle's logic was also popular during the Greek times also, right. So, there is one academy also, he was a well known established scholar. So, all that work together is known as Aristotelian logic, where Aristotle's logic is also part of. Let us look into that. So, when we talk about refer to this logic of classes, you can look into what Aristotle is saying about it. You can also look into what other Aristotelian logicians are talking about it. Now, our course here, the NOC course, is time bound, short. So, we cannot do everything, or we cannot look into every directions to understand Aristotelian logic. So, I will try to sort of give you an overview and try to make it as clear and as direct as possible. Now, if you are interested, then the book or the work of Aristotle where you need to look at to know about his logic is Prior Analytics, and this is where you will find that he is proposing a different set of propositions, which we calls the categorical propositions. We are soon going to look into what categories are, but at the moment, and he has his own structured arguments. These are deductive arguments with very well defined structure, and he calls them syllogisms. Syllogisms, and therefore they are so famous. They are so famous by their own merit that the entire logic is also called sometimes as logic of syllogisms. He does have a method of deduction for proving validity of arguments, and he also has a way to show invalidity using counter models, counter examples and so on. Now, we are not going to do all of this, but we are certainly going to have a glimpse of at least one, two, and then look into a modern way, not exactly Aristotle's way, but a modern way to look into how to prove the validity of syllogisms. So, we are starting out with what categorical propositions are, and before that we need to know what categories are. Otherwise, how can we know what categorical propositions are? Now, in Aristotle's systems, a category is an abstract but very fundamental kind of things. What categories are basically are basic types, kinds, you know. So, types or kinds, when we talk about, for example, when you look around and you will see that there are different kinds of things. Now, see what we just use, different kinds of things. For example, you may be surrounded by books at the moment. Maybe you have some gadgets around. So, there is a one kind, the books kind, and then there is the gadget kind, and then there is you, that is a human kind, right. So, this is a sort of a simple approach to understand what he means by categories, but remember, he actually meant some basic kinds, basic as in very fundamental, like what physics talks about. So, his examples of categories would be things, place, time, relation, and so on. They are very fundamental, right. I mean, very, very basic. You can carve the world into very fundamental sort of a way using this. Now, we will use more ordinary examples. For example, colors, one kind, horses, if you want, mammals, Indians, Americans, Britishers, Nigerians, and so on. So, what are these? Are sort of what you would call classes. Classes. Now, when I say classes, don't immediately jump into sets, because sets have become more axiomatized and sort of more formalized. This is a rather a rough collection. So, keep the language at the level of classes, and that is what we will talk about as categories. So, statements about categories or classes will be called categorical propositions, where you are referring to classes, and we will show you more to say that that is not just enough. There is more about categorical proposition, but this is a good beginning to start with. These are therefore a certain kind of statements. There are so many kinds of propositions. These are a special set, a special kind that talks about classes and class inclusions only. Okay. And that is the group that Aristotle is mostly interested in. The typical structure, and now this comes from the Greek language itself, which has been also carried in English, for example. The typical structure of categorical propositions would be a subject term, which is going to be a class. You refer to a class. Then a verb of a special kind. What kind? That is a to be verb. To be verb means is, are, so on. And then followed by a predicate term, which will refer to another class. So, there are two classes in a categorical proposition. One of them will occupy the subject position and will be the subject of the proposition. Another one will be the predicate, and it will occupy the second position, last position, and in between there will be a verb of the kind is, are, which we call the to be verb in grammar. So, this is what the categorical proposition structure syntax is going to be. Now, Aristotle allowed that the subject term could be also an individual, one person, okay? And that would be a class of only one member. That was his understanding also. So, it could be also of the structure individual, followed by the to be verb, followed by a class term as the predicate. So, you are predicating something about this individual. Okay, let me take some actual examples so that we can proceed further. We have mentioned so many times about classes, okay, but what is this class? I told you that you take it as a collection, except that it is not a haphazard collection. There is a binder. That binding property is the common characteristic in that collection. So, that is how the class is formed. Now, here is a class of tennis players. Okay. So, the common characteristics is being a tennis player, and by that you bind this class. Okay. It is a collection of all tennis players. Class of whales, class of Fortune 500 companies, for example. These are all classes. You can imagine more, you can think of more examples, and please do, because this is how you are going to learn this logic also. The format, as already mentioned, there is going to be a subject class followed by the to be verb, for example, is. You can also have the not in here, is not, are not, but that is about it. This is how the verb is going to be, and then there is a predicate class, second class, that will be predicate. Examples, for example, you can say festivals are fun events. Okay. Festivals class are fun events class. Get it? Now, subject and predicate terms both are about classes. That is the main thing to remember. So, this is a categorical proposition. This is how it looks like. For example, this also is roses are not fruits. Notice, roses is a class, fruits is a class, and the to be verb here is are not. What are you saying? That this class is not included in this class. So, you are still talking about classes and class inclusion. Here, this class is included in this class. All the members of this are also members of this, right. So, in a way, categorical propositions only do this. They talk about classes, their inclusion or non-inclusion. This is how they go about. We will see more example. Now, we have used some technical terms here. So, let us make it very, very clear. Subject. We have said one class is going to be the subject of the categorical proposition, which simply means what the proposition is about. Okay. For example, this proposition is about festivals. What is the job of the predicate? It says something about the subject. That is the job. And predication is the property of ascribing something, a property, to the subject through language. Okay. So, this predication we are going to look into in first order predicate logic also, but at the moment you need to pay more attention on subject and predicate. Now, categorical propositions, they do have a standard form, and that form is going to be like this. First of all, they must have something called quantity and quality. Quantity and quality. Let us take a look. By quality, we mean whether it is affirming something or negating something. So, affirmative would mean that if the subject class inclusion is being affirmed. So, festivals are fun events, that is an affirmative quality proposition. Why? Because you are affirming that this class is included in this class. Okay, that is a quality of the categorical proposition. Every categorical proposition, if it is in standard format, must have one of these qualities. Let us take a look into the negative quality. If the subject class inclusion is denied in the predicate class, for example, roses are not fruits, right. So, the subject class inclusion is being denied, negated. The quality, but categorical proposition has a quality, and that quality is negative. Similarly, so this was the first requirement, that all standard form categorical propositions must have quality, one of this, either it will be affirmative or it will be negative. Second, it must also have quantity. Quantity. What quantity? Two kind of quantities are only possible, either it will be universal quantity or particular quantity. But let us first understand what you mean by this quantity. Well, quantity here refers to the size of the subject class that you want to get involved in your categorical proposition. So, universal quantity would mean that if you want to refer to all the members of the subject class, if you want to mean the entire subject class, that is what this is all about. And for example, if you say all festivals are fun events, okay, okay, then you are referring to all the members of this class. Whereas particular would mean only some members of this class. You want to refer to only certain members of the subject class. For example, some fruits are sweet. Okay. The fruit class, you want to mention only few members in that class as sweet. So, these quality quantity is going to be absolute requirement of standard form categorical propositions. We will continue with this in our next module, but I hope you got a certain introduction into what categorical propositions are. This is where we will stop here. Thank you very much. Bye bye.